Today, we begin one of the most extraordinary stories ever preserved in the Quran. It is the story of Maryam, a woman chosen by Allah above all the women of her time. Long before the miraculous birth of Isa, her journey began with a heartfelt prayer, a promise, and a family whose faith would change history forever. This is not a legend. This is a true story revealed by Allah. Let us begin. Long before the miraculous birth of Isa, there lived a family whose devotion to Allah was known among their people. They were the family of Imran, respected not for wealth or power, but for their faith and sincerity. Their lives revolved around worship, gratitude, and complete trust in their Lord. While many sought honor through status and influence, this family sought only the pleasure of Allah. Yet inside their home was a silent test that no one else could see. Imran's wife longed for a child. As the years passed, that hope remained unfulfilled. She never allowed disappointment to weaken her faith. Instead, every unanswered prayer brought her closer to Allah. She believed that when the right time arrived, He would answer in the most perfect way. She had no idea that her next prayer would begin one of the greatest stories ever told in the Quran. One morning, Imran's wife turned to Allah with a prayer that came from the depths of her heart. For many years she had hoped for a child, but she never allowed disappointment to replace faith. She believed that every prayer was heard, even when the answer had not yet arrived. Standing alone in worship, she made a remarkable promise. If Allah blessed her with a child, that child would not belong to the comforts of this world. She would dedicate the child completely to the service and worship of Allah. It was an extraordinary vow, made with complete sincerity and without knowing what the future would hold. That prayer was unlike any she had made before. It was spoken in silence, but its impact would reach far beyond her own lifetime. Before long, Allah answered her supplication, and the story of Maryam truly began. Allah answered the prayer. Imran's wife gave birth to a child, but the moment she saw her newborn, she realized something she had not expected. The baby was a girl. In those days, people usually dedicated boys to the service of the sanctuary because they believed the responsibilities required physical strength and constant public service. For a brief moment, she wondered how her promise would be fulfilled, yet she never questioned Allah's wisdom. She named her daughter Maryam and entrusted her completely to Allah's protection. She also prayed that Allah would protect Maryam and her future descendants from the whispers of Shaitan. At that moment, no one around her realized that this little girl would one day become one of the most honored women in human history, remembered by billions until the end of time. As Maryam grew from an infant into a young child, her mother never forgot the promise she had made to Allah. Every day reminded her that this little girl had been entrusted to her only for a short time before she would be dedicated to a higher purpose. When Maryam became old enough, her mother brought her to the sacred sanctuary to fulfill that vow. Many people were surprised. It was uncommon for a young girl to be devoted in this way, and no one knew exactly how her future would unfold. But this was never an ordinary child. Allah had already chosen a path for Maryam long before anyone else understood it. The sanctuary where she now stood would become the place where her faith, character, and devotion were shaped for the extraordinary mission awaiting her. Maryam's dedication to the sanctuary raised an unexpected question: who would take responsibility for her care? She was not an ordinary child, and many respected men wished to become her guardian because they recognized the honor of serving the daughter of the family of Imran. Rather than allowing disagreement to divide them, they agreed to leave the decision to a fair process. Their pens, which they used to write the revelation, would determine who would receive this responsibility. It was a moment no one could control with influence or status. The final decision would unfold according to Allah's will alone. Before long, the guardian chosen for Maryam would be someone whose own story was also about to change forever. The caretakers gathered beside the flowing water, each carrying the wooden pen he used to write the revealed scriptures. They agreed that these pens would be placed into the river, and the outcome would determine who would become Maryam's guardian. It was not a contest of influence or reputation. Everyone understood that the final decision belonged to Allah alone. One by one, the pens touched the water and were carried away by the current. But one pen behaved differently. By Allah's command, it remained while the others drifted downstream. That pen belonged to Zechariah. The decision was clear. Allah had chosen him to care for Maryam. What appeared to be a simple responsibility would soon become one of the greatest honors of his life. And through Maryam, Allah would also prepare Zechariah for miracles that he himself had never imagined. Zechariah welcomed Maryam into the sanctuary with great care. He prepared a private place where she could grow surrounded by worship instead of the distractions of everyday life. As the years passed, Maryam learned to spend her time remembering Allah, reflecting on His signs, and dedicating herself to prayer. While other children filled their days with ordinary activities, Maryam's childhood followed a different path. Her character was being shaped in an environment of faith, discipline, and purity. Zechariah watched over her with kindness, making sure she had everything she needed while allowing her devotion to flourish. Day after day, Maryam's sincerity became evident to everyone around her. Yet neither she nor Zechariah realized that Allah was quietly preparing the first visible signs of a miracle that would soon leave even a prophet in astonishment. Maryam's childhood was unlike that of any other child. While children her age spent their days playing in the streets or helping their families at home, Maryam grew up inside the sanctuary, where every day began and ended with the remembrance of Allah. She listened carefully as the revealed scriptures were recited, memorized their words, and reflected deeply on their meaning. Zechariah noticed that she never complained about the simple life she lived. She asked for very little and was grateful for everything Allah had given her. As she grew older, her reputation spread quietly among the people. They spoke of her modesty, her sincerity, and her devotion. No one praised her because of wealth or status. They admired her because her heart was attached to Allah. Without realizing it, Maryam was becoming an example of faith long before the greatest test of her life had even begun. As Maryam continued to devote herself to worship, Zechariah regularly visited her private chamber to ensure that she had everything she needed. One day, as he entered, something immediately caught his attention. Before leaving earlier, he knew exactly what had been inside the room, but now fresh provisions rested beside Maryam. The fruit looked perfectly ripe and freshly gathered, yet it was not the season for it. Zechariah paused in surprise. No one had entered the chamber, and no one had brought these provisions. Curious, he looked around carefully, trying to understand what he was seeing. This was no ordinary occurrence. It was the beginning of a miracle that would soon strengthen his own faith and remind him that Allah provides for His servants in ways beyond human understanding. Zakaria had visited Maryam's chamber many times before, but what he witnessed that day could not be explained by ordinary means. Fresh fruits from different seasons were placed before her, even though no one had entered the sanctuary since his last visit. The doors had remained closed, and Maryam had not left her place of worship. Wanting to understand what he was seeing, Zakaria gently asked where these provisions had come from. Maryam's answer was simple, yet it carried a lesson that would echo throughout history. She replied that they were from Allah, for Allah provides to whom He wills without measure. Those words were not spoken with surprise or pride. They reflected complete certainty that every blessing, whether expected or unexpected, comes from the Lord of the worlds. Zakaria realized that he was witnessing a sign of Allah's limitless power, and that realization awakened a hope he had quietly carried in his own heart for many years. After leaving Maryam's chamber, Zakaria could not stop thinking about what he had witnessed. If Allah could provide fresh fruits beyond the limits of time and season, then nothing was impossible for Him. For many years, Zakaria had quietly accepted that he and his wife had grown old without children. He never complained about Allah's decree, but deep inside his heart remained a hope that had never completely disappeared. The miracle he had just witnessed gave that hope new life. Standing alone in worship, he turned to Allah with complete humility. He asked not for wealth or status, but a righteous child who would continue calling people to the worship of Allah after he was gone. His prayer was sincere, private, and filled with trust. Before long, Allah would answer that prayer in a way that astonished everyone. Zakaria did not ask Allah for something ordinary. Humanly speaking, his request seemed impossible. He had reached old age, and his wife had never been able to bear children. Yet after witnessing Allah's miraculous provision for Maryam, he no longer measured possibilities by human limits. He understood that the one who creates life from nothing is never restricted by age, time, or natural causes. Standing alone in prayer, he asked Allah for a righteous heir who would continue guiding people after him and preserve the message entrusted to the prophets. His prayer came from complete certainty, not from doubt. He believed that if Allah wished, the impossible could become reality in a single moment. Before Zakaria did leave his place of worship, the answer to his prayer was already on its way. The sanctuary that had witnessed Maryam's miracle was about to witness another miracle, unlike anything its walls had seen before. As Zakaria remained in prayer, the answer came sooner than he had ever imagined. Allah sent the angels with extraordinary news. They informed him that his prayer had been accepted and that he would be blessed with a son named Yahya. This child would not be ordinary. He would grow into a righteous prophet, devoted to Allah from an early age, confirming the truth of his revelation and calling people back to righteousness. Zakaria was overwhelmed. He had prayed with hope, but he also knew his old age and his wife's condition. Wonder filled his heart as he reflected on how such a promise could be fulfilled. Yet the message itself carried the answer. When Allah decrees something, no human limitation can stand in its way. The miracle that had begun with Maryam was now touching the life of her guardian as well, preparing them both for even greater events that were still to come. Zakaria believed the promise of Allah without hesitation. Yet he asked for a sign that would reassure his heart and mark the beginning of this miracle. Allah answered by giving him a unique sign. For 3 days, Zechariah would be unable to speak to people except through gestures, even though he remained healthy and continued to worship normally. It was not a punishment, but a reminder that Allah's power is beyond human understanding. During those days, Zechariah spent even more time remembering Allah and glorifying Him in the morning and evening. The silence became a blessing. Every moment reminded him that the impossible had already begun to unfold. Soon the child promised by Allah would be born, and his arrival would prepare the world for an even greater miracle that would come through Maryam herself. While Allah's promise to Zechariah was quietly unfolding, Maryam continued her life without seeking attention or recognition. Day after day, she devoted herself to worship with the same humility that had always defined her character. She did not know that Allah had already chosen her for a mission unlike any other. The people around her respected her for her sincerity, but none of them could imagine what the future held. Every prayer she offered, every verse she reflected upon, and every moment she spent remembering Allah was preparing her heart for a responsibility greater than anyone had ever carried before. Soon, the quiet life she had always known would change forever. A visitor from the heavens would arrive with words that would astonish not only Maryam, but all of humanity for generations to come. Exactly as Allah had promised, Zechariah and his wife welcomed a son into the world. The child was named Yahya, a name chosen by Allah Himself before the boy was even born. For everyone who knew the elderly couple, his birth was a living miracle. The years of waiting had ended, proving once again that Allah's promise never fails. As Yahya grew, signs of wisdom and righteousness appeared early in his life, just as Allah had foretold. His birth brought hope to the believers and reminded them that no sincere prayer is ever lost. Yet while people celebrated this extraordinary blessing, another miracle was quietly approaching. The story of Yahya was not the destination. It was preparing the world for the woman through whom Allah would reveal one of the greatest signs in human history. The years passed quietly, and Maryam grew into a young woman known throughout the sanctuary for her modesty, sincerity, and unwavering devotion. She never sought recognition, yet her reputation spread naturally among those who observed her life. People admired her discipline, her humility, and her complete trust in Allah. She remained devoted to worship, spending long hours in remembrance and reflection while avoiding the distractions that surrounded others. Every stage of her life seemed to prepare her for something that no human mind could imagine. Unknown to everyone around her, the moment that would change history forever was drawing closer with every passing day. Allah had chosen the exact time, the exact place, and the exact person. Soon, the silence of Maryam's prayer chamber would be interrupted by a visitor unlike any she had ever seen. Maryam's days followed a peaceful rhythm that rarely changed. Before sunrise, she would dedicate herself to remembering Allah. As the sanctuary slowly came to life, she remained focused on worship, reflection, and gratitude. The world outside continued with its ordinary concerns, but inside her chamber there was only tranquility. She never imagined that her quiet life would become known across generations. She believed she was simply fulfilling her duty to her Lord, one prayer at a time. Yet Allah was preparing her in ways she could not see. Every act of patience, every moment of sincerity, and every hour spent in worship was shaping the strength she would soon need. The greatest test of her life was approaching, and it would begin on a day that looked no different from any other. One day, Maryam withdrew from the people and walked toward a quiet place in the eastern part of the sanctuary, seeking privacy as she often did. Nothing about the morning suggested that history was about to change. The sky was clear, the air was calm, and the sanctuary remained as peaceful as ever. Maryam expected another ordinary day devoted to worship and reflection. But Allah had chosen this exact moment for an event unlike anything that had ever happened before. Within moments, someone would appear before her without warning. His arrival would fill her with fear. His words would leave her speechless, and the message he carried would become one of the greatest miracles ever revealed to humanity. Maryam had come to this secluded place expecting complete privacy. The silence around her was broken when she suddenly noticed a man standing before her. She had not heard footsteps, nor had she seen anyone approach. Startled by his unexpected appearance, she immediately stepped back. As a young woman known for her modesty and devotion, she feared that an unknown stranger had entered a place where no one else should have been. Without hesitation, she sought protection from the only one who could truly protect her. She declared, "Indeed, I seek refuge in the most merciful from you, if you fear Allah." Her words reflected both courage and unwavering faith. She did not panic or lose herself in fear. Instead, her first response was to place her trust in Allah. The stranger remained calm, and what he would say next would completely transform the course of her life forever. The stranger answered with words that immediately eased Maryam's fear. He told her that he was not an ordinary man, but a messenger sent by her Lord. His mission was not to harm her, but to deliver news that no human being had ever expected to hear. He announced that by Allah's command, she would be granted a pure son. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Maryam listened in complete astonishment. She had dedicated her entire life to worship and modesty, carefully protecting her honor before Allah and before the people. The message she had just heard seemed beyond all human understanding. Yet this was only the beginning. The question that immediately filled her heart would soon be answered by a truth that demonstrated the limitless power of Allah. Maryam listened carefully, but one question immediately filled her heart. She had never been married, nor had she ever allowed anyone to come close to her. Her entire life had been devoted to modesty, worship, and obedience to Allah. With complete sincerity, not out of doubt, but seeking understanding, she asked how she could possibly have a son when no man had ever touched her and she had never been unchaste. It was the most natural question anyone in her place would have asked. Yet Allah was about to teach not only Maryam, but all of humanity that His power is never limited by the laws He created. What seemed impossible to people was effortless for the Creator of the heavens and the earth. The answer she was about to receive would become one of the greatest declarations of Allah's absolute power ever revealed in the Quran. The messenger answered with words that removed every human limitation from the conversation. He explained that this was the decree of Allah. When Allah wills something, He is not bound by the rules that govern His creation. He simply decrees a matter, and it comes into existence by His command. The child Maryam would bear would not be an ordinary child. He would become a sign for humanity, a mercy from Allah, and one of His greatest prophets. Long before the child would speak his first words, Allah had already chosen his mission. Maryam realized that she had been selected for a responsibility unlike any woman before her. The future she had imagined for herself had ended in a single moment, and another path, written by Allah before the creation of the world, had just begun. The miracle itself was now about to unfold. The messenger's mission was complete. By Allah's command, he breathed into Maryam in the manner that Allah had willed, and the miracle began. There was no human father, no human explanation, and no natural process that could account for what had just happened. This was not a challenge to the laws of creation. It was a reminder that the one who created those laws is never limited by them. Just as Allah created Adam without a father or a mother, He now created Isa with a mother, but without a father. Everything happened exactly as Allah had decreed. In a single moment, history changed forever. Maryam stood in silence, carrying a responsibility unlike any woman before her. She knew that the days ahead would test her faith more than ever before, but she also knew that Allah never abandons those whom He chooses. The garden became quiet once again, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. The messenger had departed, the light had faded, and the familiar sounds of the sanctuary slowly returned. Yet nothing was the same. Only Maryam and her Lord knew what had taken place that day. The people around her continued with their daily lives, completely unaware that one of the greatest miracles in history had already begun. Maryam carried this secret alone. She did not know when people would discover the truth, how they would react, or what accusations she might face. She only knew that Allah had chosen her, and she trusted Him completely. Soon, the first signs of her pregnancy would appear, and the quiet life she had always known would disappear forever. Life around Maryam continued as though nothing had changed. The people of Jerusalem greeted one another, merchants opened their shops, and worshippers entered the sanctuary just as they had every day before. No one knew that Allah had already begun one of the greatest miracles in human history. Maryam also continued her daily worship with humility and patience. She did not tell anyone about the meeting with the messenger or the extraordinary news she had received. She understood that this trust had been placed in her by Allah alone. Yet each passing day reminded her that the moment would eventually come when the miracle could no longer remain hidden. She did not know how people would respond, but she knew with certainty that Allah's wisdom is always greater than human judgment. Maryam often reflected on everything that had happened. Only a short time earlier, her greatest concern had been worshipping Allah with sincerity. Now she carried a responsibility unlike any woman before her. She knew the miracle came only from Allah, but she also understood the reality of the world around her. People judged by what they could see, not by what Allah had revealed. She thought about her family, about the people who respected her, and about the questions they would ask when the truth became visible. Fear for her reputation never outweighed her trust in Allah, but she understood that difficult days were approaching.
Even so, she refused to let anxiety overcome her faith. The one who had chosen her would never leave her without guidance. Soon, Allah Himself would direct her to withdraw from the people, where another chapter of this miraculous story would begin.
Weeks passed, and the miracle that only Allah and Maryam knew about could no longer remain completely hidden. Maryam began to notice the first signs of the pregnancy that Allah had created without a human father. Every morning reminded her that the promise delivered by the messenger was becoming reality. She remained patient and continued to worship as she always had, but she also understood that people would soon begin asking questions. She knew there would be no human explanation capable of convincing them. The truth belonged to Allah alone, and only He could defend her honor. Rather than allowing fear to consume her heart, Maryam placed her complete trust in the one who had chosen her for this extraordinary mission. As the months passed, Maryam realized that remaining among the people would soon become impossible. Their questions would come long before they were ready to understand Allah's miracle. Guided by Allah's wisdom, she withdrew from her community and sought a distant place where she could remain alone. Every step away from the familiar streets of Jerusalem demanded courage. She left behind the place where she had spent her entire life worshipping, not because she had done anything wrong, but because Allah was preparing the next stage of His plan. The quiet journey into solitude was not an escape. It was the beginning of the greatest test she would ever face. As the sun slowly disappeared beyond the hills, Maryam stood alone, carrying a miracle that no one else could yet understand. Ahead of her lay days of loneliness, moments of fear, and a trial unlike that of any other human being had ever experienced. Yet every step she took was watched over by Allah, who never abandons those who place their trust in Him. Soon the pains of childbirth would begin beneath a lonely palm tree. Soon she would face accusations that would shake an entire community. And soon, by Allah's permission, a newborn child would speak from his cradle, defending the honor of his mother before the eyes of the people. In the next episode, we will witness the miraculous birth of Prophet Isa, peace be upon him, Maryam's loneliness, and one of the greatest miracles ever witnessed by mankind. If this video touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sadaqah Jariyah starts with a single share. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next reminder, and leave a comment. Which sign of Allah amazes you the most? May Allah guide us all. Assalamu alaikum.